Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. And today we're going to get things started off with someone that I have actually in the folder. There it is, yay. Awesome. Before we do that, I will say the thing that I frequently forget to say before I do this. If you'd like to have one of your songs featured in one of these videos, all you have to do is head on over to the Discord channel, linked in the description of this video, excuse me. And then there is a little channel in there for submitting for the VTR, also a rules channel full of all the information you need to know how to do it right, you know, naming things and file sizes and whatnot. And also mods will be there to help you out, who will help to shepherd getting the things into a position where I can pick them to be randomly played in the video here now. Such as today's first song is going to be Eternal by AeixO. With like, it doesn't say it in the thing, but there's like a capital O. So I makes you want to AeixO, like that. AeixO or whatever. It's very vowel-y and with an X, which is a vowel in some languages. Huh. Okay, let's see what this is alike.
Don't
Still going. Yep. And now it's done. Cool. All right. So this was a really, really, really good lower half of a song. This like has all the perfect punch, sub presence, stereo, like width and structure. The order of the sound design is awesome. All of the individual elements are every perfectly chosen individual element to be what it needed to be for what the song is. It's just that if this sort of sounds like what a Seven Lions track would sound like if all the noise layers were disabled. This has no high frequency kind of like effect to it. It has some, but it is not on par with the lower frequency stuff. You can kind of see it in how the highs look here versus the mids and the lows. Like this kind of this space in here can be felt as essentially being like a filter. Like this is how high we feel it happening and like hit wise. But then because there's not much of a fall off in between there, it feels like unnaturally low level of high frequency. Even though the average level is still here, because we hear these big old peaks and stuff, like it gets told to us that it's a less than level, especially in comparison to the power coming and the rest of this stuff. Also, you might have noticed the thing freak out in the middle of me doing this, and I actually just realized a couple of things in the middle of watching this. That I'm using a Maximus window to look at this final peak information, and that's actually a terrible idea. This is because even though I turned the LMH level down on the Maximus, those splits that are happening are still happening, which means that the phase cohesion of the audio isn't coming through, which is why everything looks like it was peaking like a madman, despite the fact that nothing was actually peaking like a madman. And that's probably been true for every single track I've ever said. Well, except for the ones that actually register as peaking, because I noted in this one that it was doing that. It was very visibly going around and dancing above 0 dB, but actual FL's readout was not saying it was peaking. And that's the information that I generally tend to look at to be like, it's peaking. Is it peaking? Go look, it's peaking. And when really I'm trying to see if we could visibly see that there's information going above 0 dB. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to add a actual correct visualizer for this, which is going to be wait, I have to actually, yeah, which is going to be a limiter, which is going to give us the exact same information. I should have done this just in the beginning. It's going to give us basically the same info, but on a single band and with none of that as a problem that I just described. And also someone was asking about the template I use for doing this, and I guess now's a good time to talk about what's going on. I'm running an FL Studio with all these windows open, obviously, and then I'm using XSplit to capture windows through just clicking on the object like that. So then, poof, there's the. So I put the limiter into detached mode, and now it's going to show up here as a thing. But there's all this extra extraneous UI stuff that I don't want, so I'm going to crop it. And in XSplit, you do that by grabbing the edge, hit Alt, and you can do that. I'm pretty sure it's universal across streaming platforms. So like I just trim out the bits that I don't want. And then it's about fitting it into whatever space is left over. So this is a two-part process because part of it is like I'm going to clip out like this edge here, but actually I don't want to do that, do I? No, because this is the part that it comes from. So if I actually cropped it from that side, it would take a while for it to show up, and then it would. So I'm going to crop it from over here, where it doesn't matter how long it gets thrown out there. But then there's this leftover bit where like there's still some amount of data left, and like none of that's actually going to be helpful for us here. So I have to actually make the thing bigger. So I'm grabbing the real window, and I'm gonna increase its size just so slightly, and you can see you saw the pause perspective shifting there. That was that's indicating that it's actually doing it. A little bit taller. Yes. Okay. So now I'm going to come back here and make sure the crop is good. Cool. I might have to also make it longer. Whee! There we go. Good crop there. Good crop there. And oops, still holding Alt. Not holding Alt. Grab the size. It'll just increase the size. And I'm going to increase the size so it fits the bottom. And then crop it in one more time. And then, yay! There's the thing actually engaged. So now when I play the thing, this has been building the VTR template with Seamless. Better save this project. Okay. So now we can see that that's actually what that song really looked like, what it really added up to. It wasn't actually clipping. So now we will have a much more realistic information for future songs. Yay! For which, coming up next, we have Cursed by Maekashi. Maekashi. I'm pretty sure I've been told how it's pronounced, like in a comment, and I just forgot. It happens all the time. Coming up, here it comes. Let's see how this sounds. That was awesome. But this track had the top half that I was referring to at the previous track. If you were looking at the high frequencies was while they were going, they definitely fit in a lot more with the transients and didn't leave as much of a crater that felt like a darkening of the texture. I also just dug the hell out of this track. Like, this was a cool ass, like, I like the Reese, I like the beat, like, it hit right. It felt very old school, but I had a modern edge to it. I think as time progresses, I change more and more. Everyone changes their ideas about what, sounds good, but we still remember liking the things that we liked, right? And it becomes interesting as it becomes more difficult to be able to enjoy the older things just because they don't have the punch the newer things do. So I like that there are newer things that sound like the older things that have the punch that the newer things should. That's very nice. This is a nice track overall. I was going to say something about, oh yeah, that was inventive drum knockery going around there. I like how much attention to detail there is in this track. Mostly that stuff is just effort, right? It's about being able to like I made a video once about I called it the value of effort. It was because at the time I had seen this article that was comparing Pixar and DreamWorks, because Pixar hand animates everything and DreamWorks uses like mocap and stuff. And DreamWorks had won like a Academy Award or something for I don't know what, but like Pixar felt snubbed, and they felt that like their quality of work was more impressive and therefore better because they had done the thing that was a higher effort ask, which was the hand animation. So the question about that as effort becomes, well, did I actually make a better product? Did a layperson who knows nothing about animation abilities see a Pixar thing and a DreamWorks thing, compare the two, and then be like, oh, one was better, I wonder why? Like, chances are probably, maybe, who knows? Like, yes or no? Like, if you cannot answer the question, then practically no, full on. And so that the basis of that video was mostly about being like, okay, well, the effort working on the thing harder does not necessarily mean that the thing is better. And then there's always this work harder, work smarter, not harder. But then there's the magical combination of both, where you know what the smart thing is, and you know that to do the epic thing is to do the smart thing in the hard way. And it doesn't mean to do it in a dumb way. It means do it a lot. It means take all the extra effort you just saved by doing it the smart way and apply it to the hard way. Like, to the smart way, but with the hard effort, essentially. That's the thought. And tracks like this are what that looks like when it happens, when you actually apply the effort, but do so in ways that are visibly apparent that that's where the effort went. Because otherwise you could do something like spend 10 hours making a hardstyle bass or spending 10,000 hours making a hardstyle bass, and the only way anyone will know the difference is if you tell them. And like, there will be a difference. They'll be different. They'll sound different, but like, you'll have a really hard time telling which one is which. Like, which one actually had the time put into it. Like, especially because technology is as good as it is now, and techniques are as good as it is now, that like we can compress the things that used to take a lot of work into being smart things. So this is, and when you're working on whatever, it's not about not applying effort. An example I like to think about is freaking the Apollo 13 movie with Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon and stuff in it. Like, Kevin Bacon? Willem Dafoe? Who? Am I confusing them? Wow, I might be. But point is that movie was from the 90s and had unimaginably good CGI. And it was not because they had like special secret software or amazing pre-knowledge about stuff that no one else had. It was because they knew what the bleeding edge was and then applied a year's worth of human effort to it. And with like, a studio size amount of people doing it. And that came out to looking like flawless, ludicrously good shots. And that's really what, that's what the stuff is. The effort versus product, like, result kind of thing. Like, any of us can be like, yeah, if I had 10 years and an unlimited budget, I could pixel by pixel remake like anything that's ever been done. But, to do that at like a production time scale, bit different. Anyway, good track, talking about nothing. Moving on. Next track is called Lanni, Warrior Poets. So this is produced by someone, MBS, and in the thing I did read that they said that they reproduced this with entirely, I think they said virtual instruments. I wonder if they meant synthetic. We'll find out. I don't remember what it said. Okay, but this is gonna be this, and I am interested. I'm so glad that for some reason that last track I went over on a weird tangent into 3D animation, because this is going to take we're going to talk about like visual effects work because of this track. All right, so the track was telling me that these are all virtual instruments, and are you telling me this because it's supposed to sound virtual or because it's supposed to sound realistic? I'm going to go in the direction that this is supposed to sound realistic, and I will give you all the tips that I would have given a younger me who made stuff that sounded like this in an attempt to sound realistic. Also, anyone watching this, y'all, any Corridor Digital fans here, and Freddie W and that whole side of YouTube, those guys, I've been following them forever. My God, I'm such a huge fan. Like, almost all the things I know about visual effects work at all, but I've very limited that I've ever done ever. Mostly for fun. I learned from them. And now I'm applying some of those, like, because I've been watching the VFX react and that kind of thing. And I'm applying, and even actually the stuntman react, I'm going to apply a little bit here. We're applying it to audio. We're doing what CG and visual effects work is for movies, for music. So you can think of these because these are all instruments being played by instrumentalists. So you could think of a song as being a dance, a choreographing of instrumentalists and that kind of thing. And unlike a fight scene, like doing particularly impressive things requires people who are particularly impressive to do them. And for most of history, that was what limited what could be produced, was a human's ability to do it. Like all old movies and stuff, like before we had good enough CG to fake a person, we had to have people do it, or we used dummies. Like we either did it or it looked really stupid. So, and then the first kind of earliest CG showed up, and that kind of stuff. Like I was talking about the effort going into making, like the Apollo 13 shots and that kind of thing. What kind of research goes into making CG look good? It's mostly about learning what it was that made it feel the way it did in the environment that when it's real. So thinking about an instrument, I have not heard the original song, so I have no idea how close this sounds or what you're going for, but something like this. This amount of work towards making something virtual sound real is pretty far along if we're making parallels to sort of visual effects. Like this would be something kind of hokey, but like not really technically bad, just old, like Jumanji. That's a good one. The old Jumanji movies. I honestly have that in my head because of the VFX react where they basically brought that up. The point is being that like it looked kind of weird, and there were a lot of kind of faulty it's mostly faulty motion that kind of took it off. It's kind of like, oh, this is a little bit odd, but the coloring, the actual aspect of them, what they were doing, where they were doing it, and when they were doing it, everything about that was correct. It was all completely just about right. It was really this like a last couple of like, well, almost maybe an entire 10% left of stuff to make it feel realistic. And you then compare that to something modern, like his Dark Materials. That's the Golden Compass TV show, and that has some like this is from that episode of VFX React now. It's basically quoting. And that's just the thing to look at. That's just like, wow, everything is moving, and they pretty much show why. Where when they model what the hell those animals are doing, they're modeling things like the muscles beneath them, the motion around it, like the physical reactions of the thing happening. And that's not unlike the task when it comes to instruments. And when it comes to playing something like this, like it's not so much that a human can't do this. Like especially professional piano players are insane, figuratively and literally. And their ability to be machines is pretty real. Same with like drums and stuff, but not the things they're playing, not the instruments, not the real actual things that they're using to actuate the thing. Like that stuff is a kind of random and untogether that prevents the sort of machine perfection that we're observing being possible. And to the degree that when we hear it happen, it hits us like weird CG does, where something is weirdly too perfect, when something is weirdly too flat or not like conforming with the imperfections you expect what that thing is supposed to have. The uncanny valley. This is basically the uncanny valley of a piece of music. And the the way you kind of solve for that is that you got to go into all the individual, like you have to start asking yourself what is offending my senses. And the more uncanny valley it is, the more is these really big things like pretty much no note should at any point ever hit at the same time as another note. That pretty much doesn't happen in real life, like with any instrument at all. And if you were to examine multi-track recordings of bands that play stuff like this, even at their best, they would not ever be that correct. And not only that, but nobody would ever be that correct to a grid, any grid, let alone their own individual one. Like they all kind of float around the time, but they don't hit on perfectly. And those sort of minor imperfections add up to create this kind of noise in something that when it's gone completely, we notice it's not there. And that's one of the things that throws us about a track like this. And that kind of humanization, and then because you start asking questions like, okay, well, how much of that, how far, where do I go? And then the way you answer these questions is you go figure out how it works in real life. You use references. And in the VFX world, like again, that video that was about the Golden Compass animals, and what they showed was that like they didn't when they made the shots, they used puppets that were colored like the animals would look, so that like the camera could capture the lighting response, so that the visual effects artists, they weren't going to actually convert that, like they weren't using it as motion data. What they were using it for was just to check visually that whatever they were doing was going to react the way it should. And in Music Land, like that track in the beginning that had the top half problem, that track was an example of almost sort of like that sort of CG, like bad CG, but it's so future and weird that like we don't know or care how bad it looks. That's actually something that they bring up too a lot in the VFX React, that like if a thing is supposed to be cartoonish and ridiculous, then like there being issues isn't as big a deal. But when something's real and designed to look and sound and feel real based on real things, then it becomes a huge problem when it's not. And basically the harder and farther. So that was sort of why I was asking before about if you're trying to be in real or not. Because if you're not trying to be real, I would almost desire to go in the total opposite direction of what I'm describing, where you lean in on the synthetic scientific engineered aspect and start making it that, so that it is more obviously supposed to be that and less obviously supposed to be real. And then we get farther away from the uncanny valley, where now it's like we sort of get that we're not trying to be tricked. But then when you are trying to go the whole full way, like basically like physics, you simulate, and you either go and get like crazy ass sample libraries that have all the articulations and scripting and or you get a guy and you play it. Like that's like again, in like some super huge crazy big time movies, that's what they do. In both cases, in both audio and visual, they actually get actual orchestras, because y'all probably have been wondering, when you see some of these crazy sample libraries I'm talking about, if you could do them that well, why would you ever need humans again? And the truth of the matter is, when you just have so much money to burn and your goal is to get it done as fast as possible, it is actually faster to just to put that many people in a room and do it. Like, it's dumber, if I'm being real. Like, I'm trying not to disparage an entire like millennia of tradition and jobs, but like that, it's factually, more efficient to use these crazy samples. But in time for buck kind of thing, when bucks literally don't matter, you just go get them. And same thing with the CG stuff. You just go blow shit up. You don't actually bother like modeling and CGing stuff. You just do it. You just be you do Titanic, what Titanic did, and have an actual Titanic. Have actual scale models of everything, and then also a full ass size one. Wow. Again, the VFX React thing. Watch that series if you haven't seen it. There's a lot of parallels in the processing and like digitization of visual and audio mediums, and the editing and practice and faking. The synthesis of it is pretty real. Like the VFX is essentially visual synthesis, and a lot of it is exact. Like there's additive, there's subtractive, there's FM, there's for real FM. And like, it's what displacement is. Isn't that rad? Isn't that just ridiculous? It's so freaking cool. I love that stuff endlessly. Anyway, this like had all the right bits at all the right levels, and the mix was also really good. The mix level, like it clipped a bit, and I could tell for real this time because I have the clipping that's correct. But it really only did it a few times, so I kind of you could just engage oversampling better or do some better like saturating. Like again, one of the more realistic things is actually that stuff like this can't be this well mixed. The real elements are not ever they're like mostly because they're not so perfectly timed like this. Like to push them as hard as you are when they are perfectly timed would sound very muddy. And to survive that, the medium tends to have to come down on levels. That's one of those things. Like that's one of those things you like, you're modeling about it. Like when you're doing a black and white film or a period piece or something like that, like there's certain elements of it that couldn't have been pushed as far as we can push them now. And you just gotta be conscious of that if your goal is to be real. Sort of same deal with this. Like the audio equivalent of an HDRI, which is essentially like would be a convolution reverb, and other kind of like coloring effects, like a shader is essentially reverb, and filtering is filtering. Like it's just called the same thing. But the point is that like an HDRI is a scanning of a room's lighting conditions that you could just apply to things and then reapply to like 3D models and stuff, so that it sounds like and looks like it's in the room that the thing's in. And that's also kind of what convolution reverb is for. You apply it to a thing, and it makes a thing feel like it's in the space that a particular recording of an object was, that made it, that you triggered the space's response to things. And then it applies that response to stuff in an effort to kind of just apply its effect to things. And it works pretty well most of the time. Like that's how parallel this stuff is. It's honestly pretty great. So is this track. Moving on though, we have Very Atmos by Woowoo. And I'm looking at this and I'm ready to chill. Let's chill out, you guys. As advertised. So I have no thoughts. That's how good this track was. It laid me down and I floated. The thing about like tracks that aren't trying to be super loud is that you genuinely have just so much room to do whatever you feel like. Something like this would do pretty well in just about any context you can imagine. Like if you're just into listening to this, then yay, great. If you're like, this could be great background for anything. Like, this would probably be in like someone's suggested playlist of stuff to relax to. So good job. I nailed. Honestly, when I make stuff like this, like when I actually sit down and I think to myself, I'm gonna go outside my box and do like a light thing, and it's just being an intro to something. That's usually what happens. So good job on you for actually like encapsulating an experience and having it be that. Coming up next, we have Vacation by RMC. A much less chill track, I imagine, just by the waveform. Alrighty. Let's have a do with this.
Take a breath, slow the pace, you can see what's beautiful. Whoa, destination, we're here, atmosphere's exceptional. Whoa, take a break, see the sunshine, leave your work for another time. We're cruising down the area and the sights are so sublime. There's no fuss, just relaxing, yeah, we're feeling right today. Just stopping all commotion, now we're heading the right way. On vacation, taking things one step at a time now. Oh, take it easy, things are gonna be alright. And it's our time to shine. Living without stress, good vibrations near. There's a memory to be made for every hour that we're here. Living up the days we'll never live again. We're on a vacation and it's not about to end. Every once in a while, situations optimal. Whoa, like a walk on the beach, scenery is tropical. Whoa, take a break, see the sunshine, leave your work for another time. We're cruising down the area and the sights are so sublime. There's no fuss, just relaxing, yeah, we're feeling right today. Just stopping all commotion, now we're heading the right way. On vacation, taking things one step at a time now. Oh, take it easy, things are gonna be alright. And it's our time to shine. Living without stress, good vibrations near. There's a memory to be made for every hour that we're here. Living up the days we'll never live again. We're on a vacation and it's not about to end.
And then the song ends. Come on, man. Okay, I like this. I like this aggressively happy vibe. I remember other tracks like this. Was that not one of yours? Hardcore happy, supposed to happy hardcore. So good job this one. So a couple things. One, cruising down the area. Good line. Good line. Really keeping it generic so everyone can get in there. And it's seriously good. Like, it's just so good. And other bit, I would recommend a bit that, and like, what's weird that this is how this ended, because I kind of felt like that was going to be like another mo. But when you do have your mo's,
Living without stress,
I would almost wonder that they would feel best without lyrics in these seconds. Because, like, you have lyrics a lot.
things are gonna be.
And you do like a half with them, and then a half, or rather without them, and then a half with them. It's like half without, half with, and then have this be like a lead. Like, a lot of songs that are like this it's almost like a two hook kind of thing. The hook is your voice, like a Calvin Harris experience, and then the other hook is the lead, like also a Calvin Harris experience. Like, the Calvin Harris is like the best possible blueprint for this sort of thing, where you do essentially like the verse, and then your pre-chorus is almost your actual hook, like the words that are what could be the song, and then the drop comes and it's got a lead. It's a lead synth that just does a thing. It does the Biebery whistly whip around. It doesn't really matter what it does. It like almost like it barely matters what the hook is. Like, it just that it is. And then you get to come in with your lyrics around it or with it or plus it. Like, it's fine if it does or doesn't, but the value of it is that it doesn't just become your voice the one time whole way through kind of thing, which is what this did. Like, and that's barely a tactical criticism. Like, this lives fine on its own, the way it's organized. It is how you feel you want to be. But that is my suggestion in regards to something that I would like better. But for the most part, this is still just pretty great. And I encourage everyone to make some hardcore happy. What if you want to talk about like an unexplored niche? Holy damn. We've been basically living through good grimdark entertainment dimension ever since 1995. Like, yeah, pretty much since when Doom came out. Well, that was 95. It was before that. But point is, like, we've been doing the gritty, like, oh, badass, evil, chill, not very chill at all. the kind of thing. Like if you want to like talk about music people might actually want to listen to right now, it might be this. Unironic, unabashed, unafraid to be just happy. Like, try that out. I'm saying it because I'm pretty sure I would fail and turn it into something a bit harder core than it needs to be. That's how I go. Coming up next, though, we have Eden by Akasu. Ooh, that's an interesting little design happening at large. I'm always looking for stuff like that in these tracks. Okay. Again. I know when I start. Let's go. Sweet. So here's another track that eschewed the uncanny valley, but still had pretty realistic elements in it. Was that orchestra that Native Instruments just put out? I don't remember what they called it, the string quartet business. But like because this was encapsulated around this sort of like hyper breaks sort of early 2000s anime style, it didn't really matter how mechanically on a lot of the stuff was. So if it was that library or a library similar like it, or even like anything more than a basic ass sound font, a lot of them have like stuff built into it to deal with things like when do notes start and how do they like timing wise and that kind of thing. They feel more realistic. And with strings especially, it's a bit difficult because like when a player plays, they can do things like lead into the beat so that the string is like on when it's the beat. But if that sample were to begin at the beginning, it wouldn't be on the beat. That happens a lot. Like you play a line and you can put it on the grid, but it won't really do that. So you gotta like, kind of lead it. You basically pre-lead the note, that kind of thing, and you make it work very very manually. So that's the working smart hard part where you are working smart by not spending $1 billion hiring an orchestra, but now you're working hard by the part where you basically have to do an orchestra's worth of work for every individual instrument. Like you have to basically be the people who play every single instrument. like when you're making that's the sort of the modeling assumption you're making, like you do in movies for visual effects. I came back. You thought I wasn't gonna keep talking about that, but I totally am. Like you have to when when you're animating like a bunch of different rando dudes and fight scenes and that kind of thing. Like Lord of the Rings was great. They used a program called Massive of all things to procedurally animate a bunch of randos to do the randing, but they procedurally did all that, and that's a little like how some of this works. But like when you find things that do that, that's when you find like sample libraries that have re-recorded phrases or an engine that you like kind of play one note and then it does a bunch of stuff. That's kind of what that is, where like it's kind of like it's got a bunch of prepped up, correctly timed, readied up stuff that you just tell what key it's in. That's a little bit like what that's like. This track had used a bunch of it to great effect, and it didn't overly sound unreal until it got around here, where yeah, like, those are that's how manually you have to get, where those things they can sound wrong, and they sound like they overlap in a way that's like one player can't do that because the tail of one note can't be playing while the other note's playing if it's on the same string, like those kinds of things. And that has to be a manually attentive done deal, like noted up stuff, or otherwise those incredibly detailed, ridiculous sample libraries are really only going to sound only kind of better than just having done a stupid sound font. But on that function, yes, on that kind of note, you can still get the stupid sound font and make it sound realer if you kind of work with it, like with envelopes and timing and mixing and layering and whatnot, to kind of adjust for them and create it within the articulations that the real instruments have that you're expecting to hear and behave the way you want them to. And this behaves the way the cartoons do. So unfortunately, what this sort of the subject of this sort of track, the kind of anime funk like intro, drum and bassy kind of jungle vibe, that's a lot of stuff. But the point of it is that it doesn't sound overly real to begin with. So it doesn't really matter that it's hyper. It's got such unrealistic, like this whole element, like it has like a bass player and stuff in there. That sounds pretty synthetic, but like even the real thing would sound like that. Like if it were played like that, like and it doesn't matter that it doesn't sound real or not in this example, because it's all filtered down in a way that you don't really do when you're trying to play an instrument and like be real. That so a lot of how weird it is doesn't affect the nature of the song at all. It helps to have those choices made in the beginning. But for all the parts where the elements are by themselves, they are taken care of. So clearly, when it was more obvious that the issues were glaring when it was by itself, it was you paid attention to it. So you know what I mean. This is that you just had to go a little bit harder. And I think you also knew how much harder you had to go and just more or less decided it wasn't really worth it for this particular tracks exercise. And that's real life. You know, you want to whittle down your workflow for these sorts of things so that you don't necessarily like that, because you can kind of there's still a too hard to work smart. And unless this is that, you know, when you're doing that kind of work, that's the kind of stuff that people are paid ridiculous amounts of money for in the visual effects field, where the amount of work you're doing is kind of unconscionable. So you're going to get paid for it, unless you're not, because people are rampantly abused in the industry and it's not a good time. But point is that if you're not getting overly already paid for it, then that amount of effort is, you know, up to you. I do that kind of stuff for fun, but that's just me. Good job out at Akasu. I almost called you Atlas. Coming up, we have Aarp, Color of Y. This is the best name. Aarp. All right. Weep. Oh no, though. That is just a lot of ARPs. That's a lot of ARPs. I hope it's ARPs. I love ARPs. Coming out. Noting the time. I don't think there was a single ARP in there. Nothing that really counted as an ARP. Like, there probably was. But I'm trying to, like, damn, that's funny. Lots of fun delay tactics, though. Like, this is great. I like this track. There's one problem, only one, and it's that this bit begins with this hat. This shouldn't come in until here, and it's because when this came in, we got our color taste. We got our air brushed up on, and then we had this. I also kind of think that that deal shouldn't come in until a bit like in there either. But because the point I'm trying to make is that the traditional sort of thing to do is to do that kind of breakdown sort of texture. But because this hi-hat is up here at the level it's going to be later, it draws epic attention to how little there is going on up there. And it also doesn't have enough air to feel like it can be alone up there. And that this would just not be a problem if it wasn't there. And it's only a problem for right there. Everything else, like once it comes back in here, it's high enough. Because then you do this. Once that's the right level, like I knew that was coming. Like I knew that this because this was you paid too close attention to how well this is fitting together for this to have been this like this. So it just means that yeah, the actual main mix point was gonna feel fine with it in there. So just wait for that. They don't even have that because like this part. That's a little how I was feeling this was gonna go, and there might be like a kind of a statement to be made about that, but unfortunately the result of the statement is that I can hear it and nothing else. So that's the only gripe I got. Everything else about this is progressive gold. It's just good and feels good, and you should feel good. Yeah, good job everyone today. Really pushing stuff. I dug it good. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.